My name's Marcus Webb, and I've worked for the Thames River Patrol for 11 years. 11 years of routine shifts, checking mooring licenses, pulling drunk tourists out of the water, clearing debris from intake pipes. It's honest work, boring work, the kind of job where you clock in, do your rounds, and clock out without much to think about. That changed on a Tuesday in November, though I'm not supposed to talk about what happened. My employment contract has specific clauses about it. My supervisor made that very clear. But you need to understand, silence is a kind of complicity, and I can't carry this alone anymore. We were 3 boats that morning, mine, the Osprey, along with the Kingfisher and the Cormorant, routine patrol of the Upper Thames between Hampton Court and Teddington. The river was unusual calm for a late autumn, the water dark and still, reflecting the overcast sky like a sheet of black glass. There was a quality to the morning. You know that feeling when you sense something's wrong before the conscious mind catches up, like the air itself is holding its breath. Around 9:47 AM, the Kingfisher's sonar operator, a guy named Derek who'd been with the patrol for 23 years, reported something unusual. Not a sunken car or shopping trolley, which is common enough. He described it as a sustained metallic anomaly, which was odd phrasing. I was about 2 kilometers upstream when he radioed it in. The thing is, Derek wasn't an alarmist. He was methodical, precise. When he said something was unusual, you listened. We converged on the location. The Kingfisher was already positioned over the spot, and I remember Derek's voice on the radio sounded different. Not frightened exactly, but careful, measured, like he was choosing each word individually. He said the object was roughly 40 meters down, partially embedded in silt. The sonar signature was inconsistent, which made no sense. Sonar signatures don't become inconsistent. They're data. They either show something or they don't. Captain Hayes, who commands our division, ordered us to establish a perimeter and deploy the underwater camera. This was standard procedure for any unknown obstruction. We've had to do it a dozen times before. I watched from my boat as the cable played out, the camera descending into the black water. The monitor was mounted in the Kingfisher's cabin, but Hayes had arranged for a feed to our vessels. I stood in the wheelhouse with my first mate, Richard, and we watched as the camera sank deeper, the water growing darker and colder in the lens. There was nothing but murk and the occasional drift of slip particles catching the light. Then the camera reached 30 meters, and we saw the first piece of it. It was difficult to process at first. I think my brain activity resisted understanding what I was looking at. The colour was wrong, a kind of dead grey blue, almost cancerous in appearance, with an almost translucent quality that made it seem somehow unfinished. The texture, what we could make out through the silt, appeared simultaneously smooth and deeply etched, like something had been carved and polished and weathered over an impossible span of time. Richard made a sound, not quite a gasp, more like an involuntarily exhalation. He stepped back from the monitor. "What the hell is that?" he whispered. I didn't answer because I didn't know. Nobody knew. We watched in silence as the camera continued its descent, revealing more of the object. It was large, much larger than I initially understood. What we thought was the entire thing was clearly only a section of something that extended far beyond our field of vision, and then the camera caught something that made the entire cabin go cold. There were markings on it, not random corrosion or barnacle patterns. These were deliberate, intentional. They formed geometric patterns that seemed to shift depending on the angle of the camera. Not physically shift, but optically, as if they were designed to look different depending on where you viewed them from. I've looked at a lot of strange things in the water over 11 years. I've seen structural engineering that confused me. I've never seen anything that seemed designed in quite this way. Hayes' voice crackled over the radio, and there was something strained in it now. All vessels, maintain position, do not approach the area, stand by. That's when things became unclear. Hayes went radio silent, the camera continued its descent, but I noticed the feed on my monitor was becoming pixelated, corrupted with static. Lines of digital noise crawled across the image like insects, and beneath the noise, I could see the object getting larger, more detailed, more real. Richard was pale. Should we notify Harbour Authority? He asked. I was going to respond when Hayes' voice came back over the radio, and I realised later that this was the moment everything changed. The moment when the situation stopped being a mystery and became the problem that needed to be managed. All vessels, he said. His tone was now official, clipped, the way commanding officers sound when they're reading from a script they've been handed. We've identified the obstruction as a structural hazard requiring immediate quarantine procedures. Thames Water Authority has been notified. All personnel are to cease video documentation immediately. Repeat, all video documentation must cease. All monitoring equipment is to be powered down. I looked at Richard, and he looked back at me with the same confusion I felt. Captain, I transmitted, trying to keep my voice neutral. The underwater feed is already corrupted. Should we attempt to retrieve it? There was a long pause. Too long. Negative, Hayes said finally. The object is to be left undisturbed. All vessels are to retreat to minimal safe distance, 2 kilometres. We will hold position while Thames Water dispatches a containment team. Containment team, not salvage team, not engineering team. Containment. Richard and I exchanged a look, and I began powering down the monitoring systems. Around us, the river was utterly still. No other boats were visible. The morning had developed this quality of profound isolation, despite the fact that we were in one of the most populated areas of England, with the city just kilometres away. Over the next 4 hours, we waited. More boats arrived, not patrol vessels, but unmarked, professional-looking craft with equipment I didn't recognise. Men in dark, waterproof suits descended on ropes into the water. They weren't divers in the conventional sense. They moved with this kind of purposefulness that suggested they knew exactly what they were looking for. Hayes remained on the radio, but his communications became increasingly restricted. We were given no explanation for what was happening, just orders to maintain distance and silence. By noon, it was over. The unmarked vessels withdrew. The divers came up. There was a brief, whispered radio conversation between Hayes and someone I couldn't identify, someone with authority above the patrol's hierarchy. Then Hayes ordered all vessels to return to base. The drive back was quiet. Nobody spoke. Richard stared out at the river as we cut through the water, his jaw working like he was chewing on something he couldn't swallow. When we reached the station, Hayes called all personnel into the briefing room, every patrol officer, every technician, every administrative staff member, about 40 of us in total. He stood at the front with a man I'd never seen before. This man was thin, severe looking, dressed in a charcoal suit despite the damp November weather. He had the bearing of someone accustomed to authority, not a collegial authority Hayes possessed as our captain, but something colder, something institutional. This morning's incident, Hayes began, reading from a document, has been classified as a matter of national security. All personnel present will sign non-disclosure agreements effective immediately. Violation of these agreements will result in criminal prosecution under the Official Secrets Act. The man in the suit didn't speak. He just watched us with an expression of cold assessment. Hayes continued, his voice taking on the quality of someone repeating words that weren't originally his own. What was discovered this morning was a structural anomaly of undetermined origin. It posed no immediate threat and has been secured by the appropriate authorities. All discussions of this incident is forbidden. All documentation, video, audio recordings and personnel notes are to be surrendered immediately. Failure to comply will be treated as a breach of national security." A woman in the third row, Sarah, who worked in the records, raised her hand. "Captain, what about our personal records, our logs?" "All log entries from this morning between 0930 and 1200 hours have been removed from the system," the man in the suit said. His voice was soft, almost polite, something that made it worse. "You will confirm that these logs were never created. Your official records will reflect that you were on a routine patrol with no incidents to report." "But I have my personal notes," someone else said. "I always keep—" "Your personal notes will be surrendered," the man interrupted. "All devices capable of recording audio, video, or images will be inspected. Any material related to this morning will be confiscated." The room fell silent. I could feel the weight of what was happening, the systematic erasal of an event, the conversion of reality into official fiction. They collected our devices, phones, personal cameras, anything that might have recorded. They had some kind of scanning equipment that detected what had been on our devices, what had been deleted. The technician operating it moved through our ranks like he was cargo being processed through an inspection line. When he got to me, he scanned my phone, then looked at the screen and frowned slightly. "You took several photographs of the river this morning," he said. My mouth went dry. I hadn't, or rather, I had, but by reflex, not thinking about it. Shots of the sunrise, the mist on the water, nothing of the object. The camera had been pointing in the wrong direction when it mattered. "They're just landscape shots," I said carefully. He scanned again, then nodded. "Still, they need to be removed. Data deletion on all devices is permanent." He did something with a device connected to my phone, and I felt something shift. Some finality in a system I couldn't see. When he handed it back, those photographs were gone, not just deleted, inaccessible, as if they never existed. By the end of the day, we all signed the non-disclosure agreements. We all surrendered our records, our devices, our documentation. We'd all agreed to the version of history where nothing had happened. But here's what troubles me, and why I'm breaking my silence now. Because silence feels like a participation in something deeply wrong. The non-disclosure agreements have specific language. They forbade us from discussing what we observed. They forbade us from speculating about the nature of the object. They forbade us from sharing information with journalists, researchers, or any unauthorized parties. But what they didn't forbid me was this. They didn't forbid me from asking certain questions, the kind of questions that don't technically violate the agreement because they don't disclose anything. They don't forbid wondering. They don't forbid that space between knowledge and silence where doubt lives. 3 weeks after the incident, I was at the pub with Derek, the sonar operator, and I asked him something carefully. I phrased it as a question rather than a statement, a hypothetical rather than an accusation. If something that old was in the river, I said, something that had been there long enough to accumulate that kind of silt, that kind of corrosion, how would we explain that? Derek looked at me for a long moment, then he said, very quietly, "We wouldn't, which is probably why nobody's supposed to talk about it." "But if we can't talk about it," I continued, still phrasing everything as conditional, "wouldn't there be records? Archaeological records, geological surveys, something from before? Wouldn't something that large have been found before?" Derek's hand tightened around his glass. "Unless it wasn't there before. Unless it arrived." He stopped speaking after that. He wouldn't meet my eyes, and I didn't push any further because I realised that Derek was terrified, not of the object, but of the implications of continuing to think about it. The next day, Derek called in sick. He's been on medical leave for 3 weeks now. His wife told my wife that he's having severe anxiety and won't leave the house. He keeps having nightmares about drowning, about water that's too thick to breathing, about something vast and patient waiting at the bottom of the river. Last Tuesday, I was assigned the routine patrol of the same stretch where we found the object. I didn't volunteer for it. Hayes specifically requested me. When I asked why, he said they needed someone experienced, someone reliable. When I pressed, he said nothing more. I took the Osprey out at dawn. The water was grey and still, the same quality it had been that morning in November. I ran my sonar across the area where we made the discovery. The sonar showed nothing, just silt and standard river debris. But here's what I noticed. The area shows signs of recent disturbance. The silt patterns had been disrupted, and if something large had been dragged across the bottom, and the geological composition had changed. The sample readings showed a different mineral composition than the surrounding area, consistent with something having been excavated and removed very recently. So the object was gone, or it was moved, or something was done to it that I don't have the knowledge to understand. But more disturbing than that, more disturbing than finding it in the first place, was something I discovered when I was reviewing old patrol records this week. Hayes didn't know I still had access. I was supposed to have surrendered my credentials, but I kept a backdoor login active. I wasn't supposed to do that. The NDA would cover this too, probably. I accessed the patrol logs going back 5 years. I was looking for any reference to anomalies in that same section of the river, and I found them. Not many, 6 entries total, but they were there. Each one marked as a routine maintenance issue, nothing serious, nothing requiring escalation, just minor anomalies requiring inspection. Each one logged by a different officer, spanning from February 2019 to September 2024. I cross-referenced the officers' names with current employment records. Of the 6 officers who logged those anomalies, 2 had left the service with no recorded reason, 1 retired early and 1 transferred to a different regional authority, and 1 is on indefinite medical leave. Officer James Cartwell, who logged an anomaly in June 2023, was found dead in his flat 6 months after making that log entry. The official cause was stroke. He was 42 years old with no prior health issues. I don't think I'm supposed to have discovered this. I think the system was designed to compartmentalize, to keep the instance separate so no single person could see the pattern. But the pattern is there, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Which brings me to why I'm recording this message, why I'm breaking my NDA, why I'm risking criminal prosecution under the Official Secrets Act. Because last night, I received a call from Hayes. He said there was another anomaly, just preliminary solar data, nothing confirmed yet. He said they needed me specifically to conduct the initial survey. He asked if I was available tomorrow morning. I told him I'd think about it. But here's what I realised when I was lying awake all night. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to know what's in that river. I don't want to be part of whatever system has been maintaining the silence around this. I don't want to end up like Cartwright or Derek trapped in my own mind, or like the others whose records seem to have been quietly rewritten. And I realised something else. The non-disclosure agreement is only effective if I remain complicit in the fiction. The moment I speak, the moment I make this public, I'm no longer part of the system that maintains the secret. I become a liability, yes, but I also become impossible to silence retroactively. The information is out, the pattern is visible, so here it is. Everything I told you is true. The Thames River Patrol found something in the water. It was large, intentionally marked, impossibly old, and not naturally occurring. It was removed under conditions of extreme secrecy by people with authority that supersedes our national government transparency standards, and there had been multiple similar discoveries in the same location over a period of at least 5 years. The question isn't what they found, the question is what they're planning to do with the knowledge that something is down there. The question is what I'm going to do when Hayes calls back to confirm my availability. And the question that keeps me awake at night, the one I won't ask out loud because I'm afraid of the answer, is whether this is the first time something has been found in that river, or just the first time we've been aware enough to recognize what we were looking at. The river is very old. It's been there for 10,000 years, flowing through the same channel, accumulating history and depth. Who knows what else is down there? Waiting. Who knows how long it's been waiting? Who knows if it's still waiting, or if it's simply being repositioned, catalogued, and secured by people who decided that some secrets are too dangerous for public knowledge. I'm supposed to give Hayes an answer tomorrow morning. I'm supposed to maintain my silence. I'm supposed to be reliable. But reliability to whom? To an organisation that clearly values secrecy above transparency? To a government that's willing to classify environmental discoveries as national security threats? To a system that seems to be quietly removing anyone who asks too many questions? I don't think I'm going to take that call tomorrow. And if something happens to me, if I'm visited by people asking me to recant these statements, if my employment is terminated under vague circumstances, if I suddenly develop health issues, I want you to know that I was well yesterday. I had no previous conditions, and the Thames River still flows through London, deep and dark and full of mysteries. Some secrets are kept for our protection, and some secrets are kept because the truth will require us to admit that we don't understand what we found and what it means that it's here. I'm Marcus Webb. This is what I know, and I'm not allowed to talk about it.